No one could have predicted that two families living such different lives would ever share the same story. On one side there was the Whitmore family. Their name carried weight. They lived in a house that looked more like an estate, surrounded by gates, cameras, and silence. Everything about them was measured, from the way they dressed to the way they spoke in public. Reputation wasn't just important, it was everything. Appearances mattered. Associations mattered. And mistakes were not tolerated. On the other side there was the Rivera family. They lived simply in a modest neighborhood where doors stayed open and neighbors knew each other by name. Life was harder, money was limited, but laughter was frequent. They didn't have influence, power, or protection, only resilience. Their worlds should never have crossed. But fate rarely asks for permission. It happened because of an unexpected construction project. A large urban renovation forced several families to relocate temporarily. Through a complex chain of decisions, paperwork, and timing, both families ended up sharing the same residential area for a limited period. Different houses. Same street. Same days. Same chance. At first there was distance. The Whitmores kept to themselves. Their cars entered garages without stopping. Curtains closed quickly. Conversations stayed private. They noticed the Rivera family but only as part of the background. The Riveras noticed them too, but without judgment. Just curiosity. And then there was Ethan Whitmore. He was young, well-educated, and raised to believe that life followed rules. That every step had consequences. That emotions should never interfere with responsibility. He had everything, except freedom. Across the street lived Sofia Rivera. She was kind, intelligent, and effortlessly beautiful in a way that couldn't be bought or trained. She worked hard, helped her family, and carried a quiet strength shaped by difficulty. She had very little, except warmth. Their first interaction was insignificant. A passing glance. A polite smile. Nothing more. But sometimes that's all it takes. Ethan began to notice her. Not deliberately. Not intentionally. But every time he left the house, she seemed to be there, laughing with her siblings, helping her mother, walking home after work with tired eyes and peaceful confidence. She didn't look at him the way others did. There was no expectation. No interest in his status. No awareness of his name. And that intrigued him. Weeks passed. A casual conversation turned into another. Then another. Short exchanges became longer. Silence turned into comfort. They spoke about simple things. Life. Dreams. Fears. And without realizing it, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. Sofia made him feel human, not like a symbol, not like a responsibility, not like a future headline. Just a person. But the closer they became, the louder the consequences grew. Because the Whitmore family didn't live quietly in the eyes of society. They lived under observation. And a relationship like that could never stay invisible for long. The days turned into weeks, and what began as simple glances became frequent meetings. Ethan and Sofia found excuses to talk, to laugh, and to share small moments away from the watchful eyes of both worlds. But secrecy always carries weight. Ethan's family began noticing subtle changes. He returned home distracted, smiling at nothing in particular, speaking in ways that seemed unusual to them. Whispers started in hallways between parents and advisors. This is dangerous, his mother said one evening. A scandal could ruin everything, his father added, pacing the polished floors of their mansion. The risk wasn't just social, it was public. If news spread that Ethan, heir to the Whitmore fortune, was seeing a girl from a poor family, society would react. Newspapers, social media, even casual acquaintances would twist it into gossip. The family's reputation, carefully curated for generations, was fragile. But Ethan didn't care. He had discovered something far more valuable than approval, love that felt real, authentic, honest, unattached to wealth, status, or expectation. And with that love came courage. Meanwhile, Sofia sensed the growing tension. She wasn't naive. She knew that people would judge, that whispers would turn into conversations and conversations could become headlines. She worried for Ethan, for his family, and even for herself. Yet she felt the same pull. A magnetic connection that neither time nor circumstance could diminish. One evening, after a long day, they found themselves sitting together in the small park between their houses. Sofia looked at Ethan, a quiet determination in her eyes. "Do you think they'll ever accept us?" she asked. Ethan held her hand gently. "I don't know," he replied. "But we can't let that stop us. Not if this is real." The weeks that followed tested both families in ways no one anticipated. The Whitmores tried subtle interventions, suggestions to stop meeting, casual reminders about propriety, and even trips away to distract Ethan. Each effort only made him more resolute. He had never felt such clarity before. Love, he realized, was worth the discomfort, the risk, and the disapproval. The Rivera family, on the other hand, worried not just about the social backlash, but about Sophia's safety. Would her heart be broken? Would she be pushed aside once the world turned against them? Their concern, however, slowly transformed into quiet admiration for Ethan's sincerity and patience. And then came the turning point. A local journalist noticed the unusual pairing during a public event. Cameras clicked. Phones recorded. A post on social media hinted at the unexpected romance crossing social classes. Suddenly, what had been a private matter was exposed, and both families felt the pressure of public scrutiny. The Whitmore patriarch called Ethan into the study. "This cannot continue," he said firmly. "Do you understand what's at stake?" Ethan met his father's eyes steadily. "Yes, I understand. But I also understand what I feel. And I cannot deny it." It was a moment of tension that could have torn everything apart. Words were carefully measured. Emotions, though intense, were restrained. Decisions made here would shape not only the family's futures, but their relationships forever. Sophia, learning of the exposure, feared the worst. She prepared herself for rejection, for judgment, for a separation that would break her heart. Yet when she saw Ethan, he looked at her with unwavering calm. A promise, unspoken, that they would endure. The days that followed were not easy. Both families grappled with embarrassment, gossip, and the potential tarnishing of their reputations. Arguments were frequent. Both sides questioned the morality, the propriety, and even the practicality of this union. Tensions ran high. But love, stubborn and resilient, persisted. Ethan and Sophia continued to meet, speaking quietly about their dreams, their values, and their desire to be together. Their bond strengthened under pressure. Every shared smile, every tender moment, every act of support became a quiet rebellion against a world that wanted them apart. Finally, one evening, after weeks of negotiation, conversation, and compromise, the families sat together. It was a long dinner. Words were exchanged slowly, carefully. Misunderstandings aired, fears expressed, and hopes laid bare. And gradually, grudgingly at first, understanding began to form. Both families realized something powerful. Love was not their enemy. Disapproval and fear were natural, but they could be overcome. Pride could be softened. Legacy could be preserved in harmony with happiness. By the end of the evening, the Whitmores and Riveras had reached a fragile but genuine agreement. The relationship would continue, supported and respected. And in that quiet understanding, hope blossomed. Ethan and Sophia could finally exist in their love openly, not without obstacles but without the constant weight of secrecy. The weeks following the family meeting were filled with cautious optimism. The Whitmores and Riveras began to interact more openly, slowly breaking down barriers that had seemed insurmountable. Conversations that were once tense became polite exchanges. Polite exchanges grew into shared laughter. Ethan and Sophia finally felt the weight lift from their shoulders. They could walk together through the streets, talk freely in public, and meet each other's friends without fear of judgment. The love that had started as a quiet rebellion now had the blessing of both families. It was not immediate perfection. Old habits, lingering prejudices, and the occasional misunderstanding reminded them that acceptance is a process, not an event. But the important thing was that both families were willing to try. The Whitmores began to see the Riveras differently. What they had once dismissed as simplicity now appeared as strength, resilience, and integrity. They realized that status and wealth, though powerful, did not define character. And they began to respect the values that Sophia and her family represented. The Riveras, in turn, recognized the sincere efforts of the Whitmores. They saw that the wealthy family was capable of change, capable of humility, and ultimately capable of love that went beyond appearances. Ethan and Sophia became the bridge between the two worlds, showing through patience and consistency that love could reconcile differences that seemed impossible to reconcile. One sunny afternoon, both families gathered for a simple celebration. Not lavish, not ostentatious, just a meal shared together, full of laughter, stories, and genuine connection. Cameras were absent, social media ignored, and gossip held at bay. It was theirs, private and real. Ethan took Sophia's hand. "We did it," he whispered. She smiled. "We did," she replied, her eyes shining with relief and joy. And in that moment, every fear, every argument, every tear of frustration and misunderstanding melted away. The families had learned an invaluable lesson. Love and understanding could bridge even the widest divides. The barriers of social class, reputation, and expectation had been softened, and in their place grew respect, empathy, and hope. Years later, the story of Ethan and Sophia remained a tale told among family and friends, a story not of scandal but of courage, persistence, and the transformative power of love. They had shown that even in a world obsessed with status and image, the heart's choices could triumph, creating unity where there had once been division. And as they stood together, families united, they realized that the love which once seemed forbidden had become the foundation of something far stronger: mutual respect, understanding, and happiness. Because in the end, love had spoken louder than fear, and it had won.